The only problem that I have is whether indeed, in terms of borrowing, our private sector is still enjoying the minimum lending rate they are supposed to, because it's still run between 17% and 25% when it comes to the households and the businesses. So we need to sit down and analyze why Santa, the needed correlation among these primary macro indicators that will let us know that indeed things are running in a way that we can be sure of resilience, we can be sure of redistribution in terms of sector benefit and stakeholder benefit. We need to look at that. But apart from that, I can say it's a good news. I mean, we went as high as 54.1%. Remember when the COVID issue came up,
right?
And then by 2020, I think the last election, before the last election, last quarter 2024, we came down to about 22.9, and now we are down to single digit and very, very down, which is very good. And if you look at the policy rate, recently it has been reduced to about 11 point something. It was somewhere around 18, and then from that is the March, and then it came down to 15 point something. That is the December 18 ending of last year. And then somewhere January, it came to about, I think that was 18% thereabout, or 15, sorry. And now it's about 11 point something. And if you look at this as a reference point for the banks, even if you are supposed to add 5%, it should be around 15%. But some of the banks are still not complying. So we need to also manage the lag effect between some of these figures we are enjoying now, and then how other variables will also have to quickly respond to them so that Ghanaians can practically benefit from that, and how we can sustain it. Because getting single digit is not the first time, but of course we come very low this time. And also post IMF policy tightening of our expenditures and other things, or consolidation, whether as a country we will have that ability or capacity to kind of maintain this whole economic figures and make sure that we build the needed resilience as a sovereignty, and also build the needed dependency and make sure that we can continue to sustain this and even bring lending rate to single digit. Once you're able to do that, I'm sure we'll have a future as a country. But for now, I would say that it's a good thing. We're enjoying a good primary macro indicator. We're enjoying good primary macro indicators, which are signs of very strong foundation being built or established now. But how to sustain it and how it can also reflect in other areas are my concerns now. But for now, I would say that yes, they are good news.
You've been there before. You've been a former deputy finance minister before. Looking at how it is going, how do we sustain it so that we make sure that we keep inflation as low as possible?
In the first place, I think this conversation should have been given adequate time, ample time to discuss, because it's a very good question you ask, because it should be a whole program. In the first place, I think as a country, we need to prioritize our spending. We need to look at areas where our expenditure will have strong correlation with our GDP growth. We don't have to be spending in areas that do not impact our GDP growth. And when we want to cut down expenditure, we need to also understand the fact that we just don't wake up and cut expenditure. There are expenditure items that do not have any strong correlation with our growth or social impact or satisfaction. We need to be careful with that. And two, we need to also deal with most of the primary economic anomalies. For instance, governments, all governments, most of the time borrow on our domestic market at a higher rate than even the private sector. Technically, it's very, very, very bad. And also making sure that our SME sector, which forms about 90% of our market, is properly established in terms of making sure that, yes, how can we actually make good use of our SME sector as the strength of our economy, and make sure that they are strong enough to withstand all turbulences or any turbulent period. Because most of the SMEs, honestly speaking, they don't have the requisite funds. They also depend on importations. Even our farmers, you look at them, They don't even have the needed mechanized systems and the tools they need. So it's all depending on weather. So we need to, as a country, deal with government policies when it comes to spending. Our strategy and tactics in dealing with the consolidation of our fiscal space, we have never had it right. I'm being honest with you. Two, even the weaknesses of the institutions, go and check how they spend. So it puts this kind of unsustainable debt, whatever, of our country on the government. And we tend to borrow and we tend to go into areas that we have problems with our fiscal space and we run into deficit, and it has impact on most of the things we do. Exchange rate is also one. I mean, we import almost everything. What can we do? At least agri sector, government should, redefine its corporate focus, especially when it comes to agri, so that the entire value chain of anything from agri sector will not import them. Once you're able to build these foundations, some of these primary macro indicators, we can really maintain and sustain them. Other than that, we'll still go back. Because as I'm talking to you, we'll still import most of the things we use in our country. That's one. Two, I've seen recently that there's also this good news you haven't checked. Now, I went to the bank to check, and then the TV rate is now below the private sector, comparative private sector security or asset rate. And I said, wow. Well, that was the work I did. It was part of my PhD work. It's one of the major technical areas we don't look at, where government is crowding out private sector, borrowing at a higher rate than the private sector. If they solve some of these things, then we'll go back and inflation will come up again. So we need to look at fundamentally what we have to do. And one bad area of all governments is our research. We have very weak research and development institutions. We don't finance them very well. We don't do all these things. If you look at, I think at 1056, it talks about fund that have to go to research areas, about 0.5% of our revenue. We don't comply with all these things. So I think we don't have to go back again. We should be happy with what we have. But they are fundamental, like a foundation of a building. We need to go down there, fix all these things so that we can be very resilient and very strong. Once we do that, we can keep this and consolidate and maintain this position. And going forward will help us as a country.
Dr. Stephen Amoah, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. He's a former Deputy Finance Minister.